Russian warehouses are burning, bringing the war into almost every Russian household and causing massive economic damage. Ukraine has destroyed a rare Russian strategic bomber, while prominent Russian military bloggers are mocking how the government is trying to downplay the Ukrainian attacks. Everything happening on the front lines and behind them is included in this Ukraine war situation report. Right now, you can save the most at Holy with my code. Thank you very much. The Ukrainian attacks against the Russian oil infrastructure are of course continuing. For example, an oil depot was hit in the Moscow region. Another oil depot was recently attacked and hit in Stavropol. A railway bridge near Savbivka was also hit. That is west of Ukraine, and we can see that at least part of it is no longer usable. All of this is happening right here, directly west of Luhansk in the occupied part of Ukraine. Last night, there was also another massive Ukrainian attack, which targeted, among others, Wildberries, the major Russian online retail company. But more on that later. And here we can see the number of reported downed drones. More than 400 in this case. This is what we've mentioned several times before, that only a very small portion of Ukrainian drones actually get through. The majority are indeed shot down by the Russians. But of course, it's enough if this small portion causes serious damage. Then we have visual confirmation of the destruction of a Tupolev 95. This is a strategic bomber of the Russian Air Force that has not been in production for a long time, and I mentioned in the last situation report that there were reports about it. One was reportedly destroyed at the Engels Air Force Base. We can see here that the tail was separated, so it was definitely destroyed. There are reports that this bomber was a training aircraft. It was not a missile carrier, so it was not actively used to launch cruise missiles. Even if that's true, it doesn't really matter, because training flights would then have to be carried out on other aircraft that would have previously been available for attacks. This definitely further reduces the Russians' ability to use the Kh-101 cruise missiles. These are the heavy air-launched cruise missiles that the Russians regularly use against Ukraine, and that this attack took place. And as a result, of course, the aircraft stationed there were relocated. That is probably one of the reasons why, in the large-scale attack on Ukraine that has taken place in the meantime, not a single Kh-101 was used. Because, in fact, one of the largest missile attacks on Kyiv took place on the night of the 19th. A total of 40 missiles were used, including missiles and cruise missiles. 10 Zircon-25, Iskander-3 Onyx, and 3 air-launched Kh-69. In addition, 125 drones one-way attack drones. Ukraine reports that it has intercepted 108 drones, 17 missiles and cruise missiles, as well as one Kh-69. So once again, 17 ballistic missiles were intercepted. But of course, this still means that 8 more got through, as well as 10 Zircons. For a total of 18 missiles, I'm not sure how many Zircon were also shot down. A total of 18 missiles got through. Here, in the past, or in another video, I would have tried to make a funny transition to the sponsor that doesn't come across as tasteless. Given the civilians who were killed, I just couldn't manage to make anything funny out of this. If you want to sleep better, today's sponsor can help you. Did you sleep poorly during the recent heat wave? When temperatures are high, many people lie awake in bed, toss and turn, and just can't find a comfortable position anymore. I felt the same way for a long time until I realized what the real problem was. My mattress. Warm nights are really tough on our sleep. The body has a harder time regulating its temperature. You wake up more often and feel completely worn out the next morning. That's exactly what I experienced over the last few hot summers. Since I switched to Emma, that has noticeably changed for me. I sleep cooler, more peacefully, and wake up feeling more refreshed, especially on nights when it barely cools down outside. 2 things have helped me in particular. First, the breathability of the materials, which transport moisture and heat away much better than my old mattress. Second, the Emma Air Grid technology, which provides noticeable temperature regulation so it doesn't get stuffy under the blanket as quickly. And the best part, Emma offers not only mattresses, but also pillows, blankets, and toppers. So there are several solutions you can use to make your sleep more comfortable, even in the summer. For example, I even took the Emma Classic Support Pillow, which was rated 1.7 by Stiftung Warentest in 2025, with me to Panama because I just didn't want to go without it anymore. And there's something else that convinced me back then. With Emma, you can try out your mattress for up to 100 nights. That's no coincidence. It's more of a statement. Only someone who is so confident in their products that they know hardly anyone will return the mattress can make such an offer. Emma is currently having their summer clearance sale. Until August 4th, you can get up to 50% off on many products. And with my code Heinrich Sleeps, you get an extra 5% on top. So make sure to check out Emma now using the link in the info box and treat yourself to restful nights again, even if it's really hot outside. Let's continue with the developments along the front, and we'll start in Sumy. There are geolocations of Russian soldiers just west of Komarnivka. That's right here. The geolocation itself is roughly at this spot, so it's not really outside the area previously designated as contested territory. But it does show us that Russian activity is continuing there. And we have another geolocation here where a Russian soldier or Russian soldiers were obviously in Korchakivka because they were attacked there by the Ukrainians. And that's again to some extent significant because Korchakivka is quite a bit further here at this point. That should be about 5 kilometers south of the area marked as under Russian control by the deep state map. So obviously there were infiltrations here that were at least temporarily successful. Further south along the front, we head towards Kosaka Lopan. There were fights there. Russian soldiers were in Kosaka. They entered Kosaka Lopan and were then attacked there by the Ukrainians. So this showed us activity in that direction. We now have a fresh geolocation of Ukrainian soldiers in the northern part, even a bit northwest or north of Kosaka Lopan, where Ukrainian soldiers have operated, who are obviously active here, pushing back the Russians. So, even here, the Russians have not yet managed to establish themselves. We continue along the front and have the next reports from the Kupiansk region. And there we have a Russian mill blogger who confirms that the Ukrainians were able to clear Kupiansk-Vuzlovi again. So Kupiansk-Vuzlovi is once again under full Ukrainian control. This is confirmed by the Russian side. That's significant, because there were recently visually confirmed infiltrations of Russian soldiers within the settlement. And if they were able to establish themselves there, they would have split the Ukrainian bridgehead over the Dnipro, over the Oskil, in two. Then there would be 2 separate bridgeheads here and here, which are much smaller and therefore, of course, much easier for the Russians to crush. But here, Ukrainian counterattacks were obviously successful. We move further south and arrive at Lyman. The Russians have been claiming for some time that they have already captured the town of Lyman. Now we have a new development. Visual confirmation of Ukrainian troops being attacked in the center of Lyman. So parts of Lyman are definitely contested, but the Russians are far away. The Ukrainians are still inside Lyman and are defending the town. Further south, we come to Kostiantynivka, and there a dramatic incident occurred. The propaganda footage from Kostiantynivka. I showed you in the last situation report that this footage here was released by Ukrainian units from the Skala regiment, where Ukrainian soldiers are in what appears to be the Palace of Culture inside Kostiantynivka. We see at least 4 soldiers there presenting themselves with a picture of Zelensky and Syrsky. Apparently, this was meant to signal their support for Syrsky, who is under heavy political pressure domestically. And then this video appeared a day later, and this video shows us 2 of the soldiers who were identified, with flags and with the pictures. And I recorded it at a different correct spot, because after that, they dropped the Ukrainian flag and raised the Russian one. And we see that they are there on site, and showed that. The footage is obviously propaganda footage, and at first there were doubts about what that meant. The Skala Brigade, or rather the Skala Regiment, is seen as Syrsky's personal regiment and is under heavy criticism because there have been severe losses there again and again. The regiment is supposed to carry out Syrsky's orders without regard for losses. And here it was understood that this would be used as a sign of support for him. Skala itself has since confirmed that soldiers were taken prisoner and has not commented further on the matter. There are now claims, which I have not yet been able to verify, that this video could have been staged by the Russian soldiers, who then recorded the video immediately afterwards. But that makes little sense. Why would they make this video in support of Syrskyi and Zelensky with printed pictures? So there are still some unanswered questions. It is confirmed that they are the same soldiers. These two soldiers are the same, just mirrored. So the one who is on the left here is on the right in the other video, and the one on the right is on the left in the other video. But these are the same people, and they are soldiers from Skala who were captured, as Skala himself has confirmed. So we see that propaganda obviously plays a big role here as well. We move further in the direction of Dobropilya, and there we have statements from the Ukrainian side that the Russians are using e-bikes to move troops under the cover of vegetation. The translation here probably means to move troops forward or to attack with them. E-bikes, of course, have the advantage that they provide great mobility and may also allow soldiers to carry more weight, since they don't have to carry it on foot themselves. At the same time, they can be faster, but all of this without being incredibly loud like an off-road motorcycle. And that's why they are used again and again, for example by Ukrainian special forces. And here it's reported that the Russians are trying, to advance with the e-bikes. We continue heading southwest, and there we reach the Pokrovsky region. Heading towards Pokrovsky, we have the Russian soldiers in Iskra, who were attacked there by the Ukrainians upon their arrival. In the last videos, we repeatedly saw infiltrations in Iskra itself. Then we had Ukrainian soldiers who took Russian prisoners there. But now, once again, Russian soldiers have been geolocated in the southern part of Iskra. So in Iskra, there is either still a Russian presence or once again a Russian presence. We continue further south, and in Zaporizhzhia, in this area here, the Russian governor says that the situation is fully under control. The effectiveness of Ukrainian drones has significantly decreased and has dropped significantly. We have two majors, one of the most important Russian mill bloggers, who says they can't wait for the Russian governor to film himself delivering a fuel shipment, because he surely wouldn't dare to lie to Putin. So, to put it plainly, he's lying through his teeth and would never have the guts to deliver a fuel shipment. Reba is saying the same thing. Reba, likely the most important Russian mill blogger here, is saying the same thing. All of this brings an interesting comparison to mind. I remember that in the last 3 years, reports were also submitted in the Black Sea Fleet stating that the striking power of the Ukrainian missile boats, meaning the striking power of the Ukrainian explosive boats, the surface drones, had been reduced to a minimum thanks to the measures taken by the Black Sea Fleet. But there was a small nuance. This happened because the ships of the Black Sea Fleet simply entrenched themselves in Novorossiysk and now serve as stationary launch platforms. And everyone can see where this has led in the Sea of Azov and the Black Sea, as well as for shipping in general, by looking at the current enemy attacks. The same applies in the case of Novorossiya. If you look at the decrease in deployment, the decrease in efficiency, due to the fact that there are significantly fewer cars, tankers, and trucks on the roads, and consequently, there are fewer drone attacks. So with this logic, there's no arguing with it. Are there fewer drones? Yes. Has the effectiveness decreased? Yes. That means the statistics show exactly that. And the rest are apparently side effects of a situation where even for civilians, it's currently very difficult to travel on the highway. Not to mention regular vehicles transporting food. And by the way, that's what the whole situation looks like. Here we have a Hornet drone passing by civilians, flying further, and here comes a vehicle from the mobile troops, specifically to fight these drones. And as we can see, the crew bails out and runs away while the drone hits the vehicle and most likely destroys it. In this case, of course, it's clear that this drone is no longer attacking a fuel transport. So you can say that the efficiency is decreasing. So we see that, on the Russian side, mill bloggers are making fun of the claim that the roads here are supposedly safe again, because it's mainly about the highway here in the south, which is used to transport supplies toward Crimea. According to statements from the Russian occupation governor, the situation there is fully under control, and the effectiveness of Ukrainian attacks has decreased. We also have some news in the strategic area. Ukraine is continuing to systematically work on weakening Russian air defenses. So we have the latest report. 8 air defense installations were attacked overnight, with the expectation, of course, that most of them have been destroyed. Magyar, the commander of Ukraine's unmanned forces, also says that Rubicon is moving units to the Black Sea to protect ships there. 1 unit per ship, up to 200 units in total. So Rubicon units would likely be stationed on the ships to protect them. But that also means that 200 elite drone units will be tied up and won't be available for other tasks. Here we can see again how the Russians do react, and that will certainly show some success. But first, they are reacting too late. On the other hand, the Ukrainian attacks have already had an effect here. They are tying down elite Russian units in a place where they can no longer have any influence on the front itself. Because Rubicon is one of the pioneers of Russian drone tactics and one of the most effective Russian units, actually the most effective unit, that carries out drone attacks near the front and in the rear area for the Russians. Now, their elite units are obviously being redeployed to the Black Sea to protect ships there. At the time of this report, 172 ships had already been hit. But just today, 7 more ships have been reported. 3 tankers and 4 cargo ships. In total, 183 ships have already been hit, and most of them have been disabled. 118 in the Sea of Azov, 64 in the Black Sea. In addition, substations in Crimea have also been hit again, making a total of 103 so far. 6 more air defense systems were also hit, and according to the Ukrainians, 75% of the ferry capacity has been destroyed. 3 out of 5 ferries have been completely destroyed, and the other 2 are still afloat, but now have to be towed because the bridge and the propulsion system are completely out of order. That's why, of course, there are also attacks on tugboats, because a ferry that is still afloat can be moved from one landing to another by a tugboat and can still transport vehicles. But then it has to be done by a tugboat, and if the tugboat itself is put out of action, that's no longer possible either. At the same time, there was another attack on a tanker using a sea drone. Here we see footage of how the tanker itself was attacked by Ukraine at this location. And these attacks are already showing clear effects. So we have a report from the Moscow Times that Russian grain exports are collapsing because of the Ukrainian attacks. However, the Russians are carrying out counterattacks, especially on Odessa. Odessa is repeatedly hit. And these attacks have been so effective that they would have effectively stopped Ukrainian grain exports because of the attacks on Odessa. Allegedly, the Russians are already evacuating families from Crimea. This concerns relatives of military personnel. So according to opposition media in Russia, the families of Russian soldiers are already being evacuated from Crimea. However, you should understand that this also makes some military sense. Soldiers can fully concentrate on their tasks because they no longer have to worry whether a downed drone that crashed into a residential area killed their own child. Instead, they know their family is safe. And on the other hand, the time is slowly coming when it will be helpful if there are as few people as possible in Crimea who need to be supplied. And here again, of course, it's the same. A soldier who has to worry about getting basic food and essential items for his own family can't concentrate on his work. So from this perspective as well, it makes sense to bring civilians, especially the civilian family members of soldiers, to safety in an increasingly besieged Crimea. The attacks on Wildberry's warehouses are, of course, continuing. And the warehouses that have now been hit are among the company's largest warehouses. 10 to 15% of the warehouse capacity has probably already been destroyed. It's likely that more than $1 billion in damage has also been caused. And what's interesting is that just recently, a few days ago, Wildberries changed its contracts with its sellers so that Wildberry, and its competitor, by the way, Ozone as well, no longer take responsibility for damages caused by attacks. It's just like Amazon. Private sellers and small businesses can store their goods with Wildberries or Ozone and then sell them through those websites using their logistics. And of course, these goods are delivered by the seller and are stored in Wildberry's warehouse. And now, these are no longer insured. That means, the goods that burned there are completely lost, which has already led to numerous videos from Russian entrepreneurs, especially smaller entrepreneurs, who are saying on social media that they have suffered millions, tens of millions of rubles in damages because all their goods were burned there. These sellers are now stuck with all of their losses. And in the meantime, the warehouse in Koledino has also been attacked. And in general, the warehouses that were attacked are apparently the largest logistics centers in the country, according to current reports. And at least part of the logistics was also used for military purposes. So when it comes to purchases made by soldiers themselves and donation campaigns for them, Wildberries is an important factor. Here we have various plate carriers from Wildberries that are offered there, some of which are obtained by the soldiers themselves. And as I showed you last time, there are also drone components available. It's all dual-use goods, so you can't order explosives or anything like that there. But a lot of dual-use goods were stored, sold, and shipped there, which was primarily intended for Russian soldiers. But now, with these attacks, that's no longer possible. Magyar points out that it's not just about causing damage with these attacks, but also about taking away the Russians' illusion of a comfortable, pleasant, peaceful life while their country is waging war in Ukraine. Thousands of companies may now be bankrupt because their goods burned there, with no replacement available. And at the same time, of course, customers will have trouble receiving their orders. So the war has once again come closer to the Russian public. The Russians are trying to do something against these attacks and are now copying a tactic used by the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians have been using propeller planes for a while now, and it is now being reported from Russia that propeller planes are being used there as drone carriers for interceptor drones. Ukraine was actually the pioneer of this tactic, by having interceptor drones carried to higher altitudes by other aircraft. On the one hand, they are flexible, meaning they can quickly be directed to where drones are currently operating, and on the other hand, the interceptor drones save a lot of energy, because they don't have to take off from the ground or accelerate first, but can be dropped from a higher altitude, which can massively increase their range and thus improve efficiency. Of course, the Ukrainians noticed this a long time ago. Now the Russians are copying it, and we have Firepoint, the Ukrainian defense company, released this video here, which clearly suggests that there has been a deployment, or at least a test, of a ballistic missile, which, according to repeated reports, could possibly see its first use this year. That's what we're seeing here, so things are likely to become more uncomfortable for the Russian side in this regard as well. Zelensky, the Ukrainian president, has now spoken again with Fedorov, the former defense minister, as well as with Zyrski, the current commander-in-chief of the Ukrainian armed forces. In addition, he posts numerous updates on his Facebook and Twitter pages about meetings with high-ranking Ukrainian officers, that is, Ukrainian generals. Not all of them are likely to be considered as commander-in-chief, as a replacement for Zyrski. For example, that Denis Prokopenko, that he would already be qualified enough to become commander-in-chief, currently seems quite unlikely. But we see meeting after meeting with Ukrainian officers, including Drapati, who is mentioned as a favorite, including within the military. So, the Ukrainian soldiers want him as commander-in-chief. The majority want him, and he is also considered particularly competent. So he is meeting with these people as well. Everything indicates that Zyrski will be replaced soon. The pressure from the military and from the civilian population is too great. There have even been recordings where high-ranking Ukrainian soldiers tore up their award certificates for bravery medals because Zyrski's signature was on them, and with that, their identity was revealed. That means there is effectively a revolt against Zyrski in parts of the Ukrainian military right now, and that makes it increasingly difficult for him to assert himself, of course. Meanwhile, the amount of cash in circulation is increasing in Russia. So if I understand this correctly, you can pause and read it yourself to see if I misunderstood anything. But if I understand it correctly, between the 1st and the 16th of July this year, 7 times more money was withdrawn than the monthly average. And keep in mind, that's only between the 1st and the 16th of July. As is well known, that's only roughly half of the month. So we can assume that the amount that could be withdrawn by the end might possibly double. And with that, 100% more could be withdrawn than usual. The central bank itself explains that this is due to internet problems, because people can only pay cashless if there is, of course, internet access. That makes some sense, since all of this happens during these attacks. But of course, it also suggests that part of the Russian population may be starting to lose trust in Russian banks. and would rather withdraw their money and keep it at home before it disappears. We've already talked in the past about how Russian banks are being pressured by the state to buy government bonds. In this way, to finance the Russian state's war efforts, and the Russian banks use these government bonds as collateral, then borrow money from the central bank and keep their operations running, and possibly the balance sheets there might slowly be getting a bit too skewed for this to go on forever. So here too, there are signs of unease in Russia's economy. And the economy won't be strengthened anytime soon either. Of course, we're talking about a project here that probably would have taken 10 years. But that's not moving forward either, because China is said to have told Russia that until Russia comes up with reasonable prices, they won't even talk about the Power of Siberia 2 project anymore. Because there's another pipeline, which is basically supposed to redirect the gas that was previously sold to Europe to China. And for that, a completely new pipeline has to be built. From the Urals, from the northern sea of the Urals, basically near the Urals, into China. A huge undertaking, and China wants $50 per 1,000 cubic meters as a guaranteed price for that, which corresponds to the domestic Russian price for private consumers, which is subsidized. Russia wants $250 5 times that amount, and Power of Siberia, one which already exists, and transfers gas from Siberia itself. Let me see if there's a map in here. No, there's none. So Power of Siberia 1 roughly transfers the gas from... We have it like this, roughly from up here, somewhere up above. Here, it goes down like this. From eastern Siberia, gas is pumped to China, and there, the Chinese pay $240 to $280. Now they only want to pay $50. Central Asian gas that the Chinese buy costs them $200. And before the war began, at least before the full invasion started, Russia sold its gas to Europe for $275 to $340. That means, even here we see there are really drastic differences in what China demands and what Russia demands. And it's not foreseeable that Power of Siberia will help the Russians in any way to continue financing their state budget. The deficit continues to run high, and the deficit keeps increasing. And now, of course, these attacks on the Russian economy are being added, which can only make the problem even worse. A quick reminder, with the current temperatures, it's doubly worth taking a look right now. Until August 4th, there is up to 50% off on many products. And with the code Heinrichs, you get an additional 5% on top. If you're also suffering from warm nights right now, it's a good time to get yourself a cool, comfortable sleep solution. And that's it for today's situation report. If you enjoyed it, I'd appreciate a thumbs up. That helps with the algorithm. Leave a comment if you have anything new. If you have anything to add. And if you're new here, I'd like to invite you to subscribe to the channel and click the bell so you don't miss future videos. That's all from me for now. Thanks for your attention. See you soon. Thanks also to the supporters on Patreon as well as here on YouTube. Special thanks to Lieutenant Colonel Mahamori as well as Lieutenants Robert Phil Immelkopf, Floya Capri, Burton Ment, Lick Chutter, NTX, Merle Meister Nagel, Markus F. Alex Rosenthal, Matt Best, Mütter 1000 Janis J, Cunningham, Euschres, Finn, 5 Farbflecktarn, Jans vom Eck, Uwe Dufresne, Nickname to Bip, Carsten Schulz, Tequila 42. Thank you very much. Without you, this would not be possible.